If you're autistic like me, you're probably aware that neurotypical people are born with a set of social skills. We just don't have them by default, but we can learn them. But then on top of that, there are other skills that they don't have that we can also learn. I spent 20 years in sales, and one of the first self-help books that helped me was called How to Win Friends and Influence People. On this podcast, the first 2 episodes are dedicated to Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of that book. This particular episode is focusing on Chapter 3 of that. Yes, I'm aware the title of that book is rather corny, but bear in mind it was written in the 30s and it's the original self-help book. And if you want what I'm saying to make more sense, go back and listen to those first 2 episodes. Now, this chapter starts out by talking about how to get what you want out of other people. And it sort of starts out by talking about what do you do when you go fishing? What do you put on the hook? Do you put ice cream or toffee? I can't think of what he actually said, but you don't put what you want on the hook when you go fishing. You put the things that you know that particular fish is going to like. Yet, in everyday life, I've noticed this when I worked in sales, that people wouldn't do that. They would fail at that. Or just people who are entrepreneurs. One quick story that happened to me about 10 years ago in Australia, we have these signs given out by the power companies that is a logo with someone knocking saying, "Don't knock." And it literally says, "Do not knock," on the door. And it's so people don't knock on your door and try to sell you stuff, right? And as a result, when you did that, people just tended to not knock. And even people who, your neighbours, were not as likely to knock either, but that's not the point. And this one day I was there, I was on the phone and I heard a knock at the door. Bearing in mind, because of that sign, I was used to only people I wanted or knew me would be knocking on the door. And so I'm on the phone and I hear a knock at the door. So I open the door and says to the person, "Hang on a second, sorry, someone's at the door." And I open the door and this bloke standing there and he just goes, "G'day, I'm here, I own the garage down the road and I'm just trying to drum up some business." Right? He's not talked about what he can do for me. He's not nothing. He's just literally knocking on my door trying to tell me to come and use him down the road because he wants some business. And all I did was point at the sign. I didn't say anything. I just pointed at the sign that "Do not knock." And the guy just looked at it and went, "No worries," and then just walked off, which I think summarised what the kind of person that guy was. And even if he'd read one book about how to get someone to buy your product or service, he would have been at much bigger an advantage. All he had to do is talk in terms of what I was after or what I'm looking for. And without giving this any thought, just right now I'm thinking if I was him or anyone like him, I would start by saying, "Hey, where do you get your car service now? Hey, I'm just down the road. I can offer you this. I can give you a loan car. I can give you a lift back. You know, it only takes a minute, whereas your current, how far away? Oh, they're 10 Ks away. Well, I'm 1 K away." You could have, there's so many things that this guy could have done. And then there's this quote from Henry Ford. "If there is any one secret to success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as your own." An example that he gives is if you don't want your kids to smoke, don't lecture them. Point out that if they do smoke, they won't be able to make the sports team or they may not be able to make the football team because it will affect their fitness. So you're talking in terms of how it would affect them and how it would negatively affect them, not telling them what you want or lecturing about, "Oh, well, it's bad for you." And then he tells his story about these guys that were on a farm. They weren't farmers, but they owned a farm or something, and they were trying to get this calf to go into the barn, and one guy's at the back pushing the calf and the other guy's at the front. And if you've ever been on a farm, by the way, calves can be pretty big. And they were getting nowhere because they wanted the calf to go into the barn, and the calf, naturally because it was being pushed and pulled, it was refusing to go. And then the maid that worked on the farm as well, she came along and she put the thumb in the mouth of the calf, and it started to suck the thumb like it was a teat, and she led it into the barn. It got what it wanted and it followed her. And if you're like me, also as a side note here, it might work on you when someone else tells you from their point of view. You might be likely to, I know I am, if someone says, oh, this thing's inconveniencing me, and they're just talking about what they want, and I think, well, I can do something to accommodate them, I absolutely will do that, because why wouldn't I do that? But sadly, there are a majority of people won't do that. And even me, I won't always do that, because of course, like I said before, the guy coming trying to drum up business at my front door, I had no interest in doing that. In that case, the example, I mean, people I know, if they come and say to me, oh, if you're parking your car there, it's in my way, would you mind moving it, that kind of thing. Would you mind parking in a different place from now on, or something? If someone says that to me, I'm more likely to, but not everyone's likely to do that for us. And that's what the issue I have. I think, well, hang on, if that was me, I would help you, or whatever it would be. But just the majority of people don't. The other interesting example Dale gives in his book is because he started out giving lectures and teaching people all of this kind of stuff before he wrote the book. And he continued to do so after he wrote the book. And this is a situation he got himself into, is that he would sell tickets, and I think it was for 20 nights or something like that, where these lectures, that's how long this whole program would go for, 20 nights, and he would sell tickets to people. And of course, the tickets, once it was all sold and everything, it would say the name of the venue. But after he did all this, the venue told him that the rent was going to go up by ×3. And the majority of us, of course, as I'm hearing this or reading this, I'm thinking, that's absurd. Like, what the hell? And my first instinct absolutely would be to go to tell them, I'm not paying that. You can jam it up your jumper. And this is what he did. He went to them and he got a piece of paper and he wrote 2 columns. He wrote advantages and disadvantages. I'm reading it here just to make sure I don't get it wrong. In the advantages, so he goes to them and says, oh, look, I'm just going to, talk about the advantages and disadvantages of this ballroom. There's more to this. He just says something like, seeing it from their point of view. And of course, you should try to maximize profits and everything. And so under the advantage column, he's written ballroom free. The ballroom is where he's holding the thing. And so he's pointing out to them, without threatening them, that if they go ahead with this massive price hike of the rent, that the ballroom will be free, because he says to them, that he would not be able to pay the fee that they're asking. And he notes that the other things like dances and other affairs like that would make them more money than what his lectures would make them. And then he puts disadvantages. Now, it took me a while to get my head around the way this is worded, but essentially he says, instead of increasing your income from me, you're going to decrease it, because you're going to wipe it out, because I can't afford to pay what you're asking, and I'd be forced to hold these lectures elsewhere. And number 2, these lectures attract crowds of educated and people to your hotel. That's good advertising, right? If you spent $5,000 advertising in a newspaper, you wouldn't bring as many people as what I could bring. And so he gives them that bit of paper with the advantages and disadvantages, and then says, look, I hope that you'll consider your options before you make your decision. And they still gave a rent increase, but it was, 30%, not ×3. And also, my thoughts on this is, if we don't do this, if you don't think about what the other person wants, you are communicating, I don't care what you want. That's the other danger of not doing this. And I do appreciate that it is easy to think about what you want. Every TV show or movie I see where there's some conflict and something happens, the characters always go and say, oh, that doesn't suit me. No, you should do it differently, and all this kind of stuff. And it sends us all a message that that's how things should be done. But instead of doing that, stop for a second and try to think. Just stop with think about how it affects you and communicating that to the other person. And just stop and start to think about how it's going to affect them, or what would be beneficial to the other person. And I promise you, if you start there, you're more likely to come up with something and see it from their point of view, and come up with something like what I said about the kids smoking. How is smoking going to affect the child, not how is it going to affect you, to quote the example I gave earlier. And also in the book, Now, I'm going to tell the part of this story and see if you can think up of a reason or what you would say. Again, another thing I've got to say here is don't do this perfectly. This is like of any new skill. You haven't done this before. You're going to be bad at it. We're all going to be bad at it. I was bad at it. I'm not perfect at it now, even after 30 odd years since I learned it. So I'm going to give you a scenario, and I would like you to think. You can just write it down to yourself. You don't have to tell anyone this. Just think in your head, what would you do? So you're the owner of a freight company, and you take delivery. What it is, massive trucks roll up to your depot and they drop off stuff. Then you've got to be the one who ships it away. And you've got this customer, you've got a few customers, in fact, that the few things, they don't come until late in the afternoon, right when you're about to close almost. And because so many people do this, it puts pressure on you, and you feel pressured that you need to get this freight out still at in the same time frame as if they delivered it in the morning. First of all, that's the thing, that you're feeling pressured, but also what you want from this. You want to send them a letter to communicate what you would like done differently. So what you want them to deliver in the morning, not in the afternoon. And you want to send this to the guilty parties that are doing this regularly. Now, here's the thing. You can't criticise them. You can state facts, but you can't criticise them if you're going to write this letter. And you want them to start delivering stuff in the morning instead. Now, here's one little clue I'll give you. The outcome that what you want is also what they want. They want their stuff to be delivered ASAP. If it's a next day delivery, they bring it to you today, they want it delivered tomorrow. Let's just say it's a local delivery. That's what they want, and it's also what you want. Just remember that as well. And so just think about what you would say. Again, don't tell me. You don't have to write it in the comments. You don't have to write it to anyone. Just think to yourself. And the reason I'm getting you to do this exercise is to think about what you would say to someone in a situation where there's a benefit to both parties here. And essentially here you do want the same thing. You both want the stuff delivered ASAP. If it's a next day delivery, you both want it delivered tomorrow. And not forgetting that delivering it in the afternoon to you is hindering that process. And the other rule, of course, as I said, you can't criticise them, but you cannot give them an ultimatum either. You can't say to them, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. That can't be part of it either. You can't do that. And to be clear, when I say can't, if you want to succeed at this little role play, if you like. And so at the end of the chapter, he names what it is you're after, and it is arouse in the other person an eager want. And one last vital tip that I have for you about this is to don't be attached to the outcome here. Just all you're doing is shifting from thinking from your point of view and communicating that, oh, don't you see how this affects me, to, oh, thinking from their point of view instead. And so I said, don't do it perfectly. Don't try to do it perfectly. And also, as a little caveat also, I've done this for years and forgotten it for years. In a professional aspect, when I was at work, I would always do this. 100% of the time. I never would say to a customer, don't you see how this is affecting me? But in my private life, I sometimes would do this and others times not do this, which is a reflection of how poor my boundaries used to be. But that's another story. And if you want the answer, if you can't come up with the answer, you've got two choices. You can listen to the audiobook or read the book and read chapter 3 to the scenario, or you can just ask in the comments and I'll tell you the answer if you want to know. So, yeah, take care out there.